The Indo-Pak War of 1947 to 48. Soon after independence and the painful partition of British India, India and Pakistan fought their first war over the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir. In June 1947, when partition was announced, the 600 princely states that existed then were given the choice to accede to either India or Pakistan or remain independent. Most rulers agreed to merge with the country closer to them, while a few chose to remain independent. Maharaja Hari Singh of Jammu and Kashmir decided to avoid accession to either country. He preferred to enter into a standstill arrangement which guaranteed that existing administrative arrangements would continue to be honored until a new agreement was made. An appeal was made to both countries to not arm twist the state into taking a quick decision but to allow a people's verdict. Pakistan, which felt that since a majority of Kashmir's population was Muslim, it should be a part of Pakistan, signed the agreement but was not ready to wait. In a crafty bid to take over Jammu and Kashmir, it started infiltrating the hill state just a few months after independence with a force of Pathan tribesmen, ex soldiers, and deserters from the state forces intermingled with Pakistan Army regulars. The men were well supplied with rations, arms, vehicles, and medical supplies and promised extensive looting. In October 1947, the raiders started attacking the border and villages and creating a deadly atmosphere of plunder, loot, and rape. They did not distinguish between Hindus and Muslims. They picked up women, took them back forcibly with them, and left hundreds dead in the villages that they went through. Initially, the raiders were fought back by the state military, but realizing that the attacking Lashkars were proving too strong for them, Maharaja Hari Singh requested India's help. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru made a shrewd diplomatic move by offering help subject to Kashmir, signing the instrument of accession to the Union of India. That was the only way the Indian army could enter Jammu and Kashmir legally. After Maharaja Hari Singh signed the document, Indian troops were sent to defend Kashmir and drive out the raiders. India had to airlift troops and equipment to Srinagar. A bloody conflict resulted. The raiders were chased out of Kashmir to beyond Barmula and Uri, and these towns were captured back. Jhangar, Rajouri, Tithwal, Kargil were other places that were recaptured by the Indian forces. The Zojila Pass was taken over with the use of tanks which could not have been imagined at that height, and even Dras was won. Nehru finally asked the UN to intervene, and after protracted negotiations, a formal ceasefire was declared in January 1949. According to the terms of the ceasefire, Pakistan had to withdraw its forces, both regular and irregular, while allowing India to retain a minimum military strength in Jammu and Kashmir and ensure the prevalence of peace, law, and order. Pakistan took over about two-fifths of Kashmir while India wrested control of the rest of Kashmir, which included the most fertile and prosperous regions. Army units that participated in the action and fought bravely were awarded a total of 11 battle honours and 1 theatre honour. These included Gurais, Kargil, Naushera, Srinagar, Punch, Tithwal, Rajouri, and Zojila. It is believed that both India and Pakistan lost about 1,500 men each in the war. The Indian Army fought bravely, and the list of gallantry awards ran long. For their supreme acts of bravery, cold courage, and devotion to duty, 5 soldiers were decorated with the Param Veer Chakra, independent India's highest gallantry award. Major Somnath Sharma, Nayak Yadunath Singh, and Company Havaldar Major Piru Singh Shekhawat died fighting and were given the award posthumously, while Lance Nayak Karam Singh and Second Lieutenant Rama Raghoba Rane lived to wear the medal on their chests. Somnath Sharma. 15 minutes early for my appointment with Lieutenant General retired Surendranath Sharma, a former engineer-in-chief of the Indian Army and younger brother of late Major Somnath Sharma. I settled down to wait in the lobby of his tastefully done-up house in Defence Colony, New Delhi. The slim and remarkably fit 90-year-old Sherwoodian walks in almost immediately. He dazzles me up with his memory, his firm grip on names and dates, his British accent, his delightful wit, and his old world courtesy that includes holding doors open and walking me down to my car when the interview is done. When he recounts tales of his brother's bravery, there's pride in his voice. When he speaks about how the schoolboy Somi would march the kids in the neighborhood up and down, he smiles nostalgically. And when he tells me about Somi's infatuation with a very young girl when he last came to meet the family in Rawalpindi in 1947, he chuckles like a schoolboy refusing outright to tell me more. We don't discuss ladies, he says gallantly. I'm disarmed with his charm, but what impresses me most is the lucid manner in which he recounts the Battle of Badgam and makes Somnath Sharma and the 1947 war with Pakistan come alive in front of my eyes. Badgam, Jammu and Kashmir, 3rd November 1947. Resting his plastered left arm on the edge of the trench, Major Somnath Sharma raises his head and squints at the sun. It has moved west, but there are still a few hours of daylight left. He has to move his company soon, and if they make good time, they can be back at the Srinagar airfield by night. It has been a tense and grueling morning, but now he's feeling quite relaxed. At first light that day, a fighting patrol comprising A&D companies of 4 Kumaon under Somi and one company of 1 Para Kumaon under Captain Ronald Wood had been sent to Badgam after intelligence reports had warned that a 1,000-strong Lashkar of Pathans led by Pakistan Army regulars was heading towards Srinagar. Their aim, the reports had said, was to take over Srinagar airfield and thus handicap the army by cutting off their supplies. The fighting patrol's job had been to search for the raiders and engage them at Badgam, a small village there to 4 miles from the Srinagar airfield. Early morning, Sharma had reported that his company was positioned on a hillock west of the village and that they had dug trenches there. 1 Para Kumaon had established themselves southeast of the village and had reported that the village was quiet and peaceful. Sharma had also reported that the villagers had been going about their course quietly, though they looked scared. He has also noticed that some of them were clustered in a nala where they seemed to be taking shelter. Since Badgam appeared peaceful, 1 Para Kumaon was ordered to circle east and search, and then return to the airfield after making contact with 1 Punjab. They did so and were back in Srinagar by 1 pm. Since Badgam is quiet, Sharma is also ordered to start pulling his companies out. At 2 pm, he reports that A company, which had been ordered to circle to the west, had done so and was also on its way to the airfield. Somi plans to keep D company in Badgam till late evening and then withdraw to the airfield. His decision is supported by Brigadier L.P. Sain, DSO. The two know each other well from battles in the Arakan in 1944 to 45. The soldiers are just biding time since there are only a few hours to go. The general stops for a breather and a sip of the lemonade that had appeared by our sides and then shakes his head gravely. The people Somi had mistaken for villagers in the Nala were in fact Pathans dressed as Kashmiri locals with weapons hidden under their loose chogas. He grimaces. The Lashkar was arriving in Badgam in bits and pieces to conceal their movement, and it was led by a Pakistani major who was hatching a crafty plan even as he watched the soldiers of the Indian army patrolling the village. He had asked his men to mix with the locals and wait for the rest of the Pathans who were quietly making their way to Badgam after slowly trooping in through the gap between the ranges at Gulmarg. He planned to attack Badgam when they reached a count of around 1,000 men and then advance to the Srinagar airfield. Pakistan's plan was to attack the airfield, cut off the army's access, and then take over Jammu and Kashmir. It was a great plan, the general acknowledges grudgingly. Around 2 pm, well after A company left Badgam, the villagers grouped in the Nala began to disperse. While Sharma and his men thought they were returning to their homes, they were quietly positioning themselves around D company. The Pakistani major had decided not to wait beyond afternoon, and as soon as he had about 700 men, he launched his attack. Sharma and his company, consisting of about 90 men, were the only ones left to fight the raiders. They were outnumbered 7 to 1. Wrinkling his forehead in an effort to remember, Lieutenant General Sharma says it was around 2:30 p.m. that Somi and his men were taken by surprise when gunfire started coming at them from the village. Soon they were receiving machine gun fires as well. Somi reported to his brigade commander that his position was under attack. He added that he was apprehensive about returning fire in the direction of the village because he could hurt innocent people, including women and children. By then, the raiders had started coming up in large numbers from a depression in the west. There were hundreds of them, and they started targeting Somi's company with mortar and automatic fire, says Lieutenant General Sharma. Since the Pathans were not trained soldiers, every 100 men were commanded by a Viceroy's commissioned officer (VCO), while every 10 men had a regular Pakistani army soldier with them who inspired them to fight. Lieutenant General Sharma says he heard from soldiers of Fort Kumaon who returned alive from the battle how Somi encouraged his men to retaliate and, completely unmindful of his own safety, rushed from one trench to another, urging them to fight back bravely. Such was the grit and determination of the men that the first few attacks, which came from different directions, were successfully repulsed. The Pathans, however, drew strength from sheer numbers and began to increase the pressure. Soon they had surrounded D Company from three sides and started climbing up the hillock where the trenches were. They came in hordes, brandishing automatics and shouting Allahu Akbar. Somi knew he was outnumbered. He called the brigade commander and asked for ammunition and reinforcements. He was told that one Punjab was being sent for their support, but Somi realized they would take time to get there since they had to move in battle formation. He also understood how important it was to hold back the enemy till reinforcements could be sent to close the gap leading to Srinagar. If that was not done, the raiders could advance right up to the airfield and take over Srinagar. Somi decided to hold back tenaciously and urged his men to fight to the last. It is to their credit that they did, despite the fact that they were completely outnumbered and their .303 rifles were no match for the enemy's medium machine guns. Somi knew his company would not be able to hold out for long, but he did not let his men lose confidence. With complete disregard for his own safety, he rushed across the open ground in full view of the enemy and went about encouraging his men. When the heavy casualties started affecting the men manning the light machine guns, Somi himself went around using his good hand, his left arm was in plaster, to fill magazines and hand these over to the light machine gunners. He would tell them when and where to fire. Udhar maro, he would say, and the battle raged for almost 5 hours, the general tells me. That was precious time for the Indian army since the raiders were being delayed and they were getting time to plug the gaps as they built up strength with Indian Air Force planes flying in more troops. Eventually, the men started running out of ammunition. When Somi informed Brigade Headquarters HQ about this, he was asked to pull back. He refused outright. The enemy is only 50 yards from us. We are heavily outnumbered. We are under devastating fire. I shall not withdraw an inch but will fight to the last man and the last round, was his last message to the headquarters. Just a few minutes later, while he was crouched in a trench next to the Bren gunner, helping him load the gun, a mortar shell landed on the open ammunition box next to them. An eardrum shattering blast rent the air. It blew up Somi, his Sahayak, an officer's helper or man, Friday, who looks after his uniform and turnout, the machine gunner, and a JCO who was standing nearby, recounts Lieutenant General Sharma, his voice gentle. For Somi, who had insisted upon leading his company to Kashmir despite having his arm in plaster, it was all over. But it is considered a credit to his leadership that the men under his command kept his word. The non-commissioned officers, NCOs of the company decided to fight on, and they managed to hold back the raiders for another hour even after Somi had died. In fact, as the ammunition became desperately short, another hero emerged. Lieutenant General Sharma talks with great respect about Lance Nayak Balwant Singh of D Company, who took a brave initiative when most of the soldiers were left with just one round or two. He asked them to collect whatever rounds were left with them and hand those over to him. He then loaded his gun with these 2 or 3 magazines and told the rest of the men to retreat while he held up the enemy. "There's no point in everybody dying," he said. "I'll hold them back for the few minutes you need to disappear into the fields." So he and three others stayed back to battle the raiders while the rest left the hillock from the back. Shooting the last of their rounds, these four brave hearts got out of their trenches and charged at the enemy. "They were killed, but they helped their comrades survive," recalls the general. Overall, the brave action of D Company resulted in the raiders being delayed by close to 6 hours, by which time the Indian Army had managed to get into position and block the enemy advance to Srinagar airfield. As aircrafts continued to fly in with more and more soldiers, the airfield defense had become strong enough to stop any attack. On the morning of 5th November, Badgam was counterattacked by the Indian Army and captured. The bodies of 300 raiders were counted, which proved just how ruthless the fight had been. The retaliatory fire had been so harsh that the Pathans had not been able to pick up their dead. Since they were not trained soldiers, they were not used to losing men in such a big way. The big losses broke their resolve and they started pulling back. When the army took over Badgam, they found the Pakistanis retreating. "When a man's will is broken, he cannot fight," says Lieutenant General Sharma. In the Battle of Badgam, Fort Kumaon lost Major Somnath Sharma, Subedar Prem Singh Mehta, and 20 other ranks. 26 people were wounded in the operation. For his gallantry, tenacious defense, and exemplary leadership that inspired his men to fight the enemy, in spite of being outnumbered 7 to 1, Major Somnath Sharma was awarded the Paramveer Chakra (PVC) posthumously. It was the first PVC of independent India. We have come to the end of the interview, and as I switch off my dictaphone, the general stands before a beautiful oil painting of his brother, which hangs on the wall. The late Major Somnath Sharma of D Company, Fort Kumaon, is standing in his uniform, ribbons on his chest. He looks handsome and proud. Lieutenant General Sharma turns away with a distant look in his eyes. Somi died. He was not there to die. He was there to kill. A job had to be done. It was his job and he did it. He says, there's steel in his voice. Somi doesn't answer. A half smile plays on his lips. Major Somnath Sharma was born on 31st January 1923 in Jammu. His father, Amarnath Sharma, was a medical corps officer to the rank of Major General. Of his two brothers, Surendranath, better known as Tindi in army circles, went on to become the engineer-in-chief. The youngest, Vishwanath, joined the armoured corps and went on to become the chief of army staff in 1988. Of his two sisters, Kamala joined the army as a doctor and married an army officer who also rose to the rank of Major General. The other, Manorama, also married a brigadier in the army. When Tindi was 4 years old, his father was detailed to do a medical course in England and decided to take his wife along. Somi and Tindi, who were about 1 year apart, were put in Hampton Court Convent in Missouri. Though Somi was older, they were put in the same class and made a good team. The two remained boarders there, happy to be in the same dormitory. We got kicked around by seniors, but Somi was my protector because he was tougher and bigger than me, remembers Tindi. I was the brains behind the pair, and I was very good at math, and he was more into outdoor stuff. Other than history and general knowledge, Somi was just not interested in studies. The deal between the brothers was that while Somi would protect Tindi from the bullies, Tindi would finish all the homework in the evening so that Somi could get up early and copy it. Both went on to study at Sherwood, from where Somi, who always wanted to join the army, applied for admission to the Prince of Wales Royal Indian Military College, now Rashtriya Indian Military College, Dehradun. After passing out in May 1941, he joined the Indian Military Academy, IMA, where he did exceptionally well. By then, the war had started and IMA training was cut short. After about 9 months of training, Somi became a commissioned officer in February 1942. He was just 19 when he joined the 819 Hyderabad Regiment, now Fort Kumaon, as a second lieutenant. He faced action in Arakan, where one of the toughest battles of the Burma War was fought with the Japanese on the Arakan coast, where three Indian battalions landed along with one battalion of British commandos. That was where Somi saw a wounded Kumaui soldier sitting against a tree. He asked the man to run, but when he replied that he was not able to stand up, the tough and battle hardy Somi carried the man on his back right through Japanese crossfire, laughing all the way and bringing him back to safety. The two were not shot, possibly because the Japanese respected raw courage. Returning to India as a major and the adjutant of Fort Kumau, Somi got busy in internal security duties in various parts of Punjab and helping the police and civil authorities in controlling civil disturbances in 1947. Many educational institutes in Delhi still talk of his great powers of organization in arranging supplies of rations and safe movement of people from one locality to another. He was made in charge of a flying squad of men with jeeps, assist the police in controlling civil disturbances in Delhi. His amiable but firm command instilled confidence and discipline in many difficult situations. The same was tested when hostilities broke out in Kashmir in 1947 and India decided to send her troops to save Kashmir from the Pakistani raiders. Though Somi's left arm was in plaster due to an old wrist fracture suffered doing gymnastics, he insisted on going with his company. As he was so keen to go, the commanding officer finally agreed and ordered him to fly in and command two companies of Fort Kumau tasked with the protection of Srinagar airfield. There are some priceless black and white pictures of him with his arm in a cast taken at Safdarjung airport, where he is grinning broadly, no doubt happy with the thought of being with his men in war. When Somi landed in Srinagar in late October, the raiders were closing in on Barmula with Badgam en route. That was where a bloody battle would be fought and the brave young officer would bring home the first Paramveer Chakra of independent India. Somi's life story is often quoted in books and army messes. It is a tale of sheer courage and glory. The example set by him is recounted with a lot of respect and is fondly remembered not only by Fort Kumau but the entire armed forces. To ensure that young soldiers continue to be inspired by his bravery, the training ground at the Kumau Regimental Centre in Ranikhet has been named Somnath Sharma Ground. A beautiful red brick gateway called Somnath Dwar leads to the perfectly maintained parade ground, flanked by the snow-capped Himalayas. The ground has seen the sweat and toil of thousands of young boys, new recruits of the Kumau regiment and the Naga regiments who take their first step as young soldiers here. Karam Singh, Richmar Gali, Kashmir, 13th October 1948. The Sikh soldier peering out of the trench looks worried. दुश्मन नेड़े सी, अस्सी तिन सी, ते चौथा तू, हुन के करिए? The enemy has come close. We are just three and you are the fourth. What do we do? He whispers to his section commander, Lance Nayak Karam Singh, who is standing beside him and still and ramrod straight. Karam Singh is a handsome Sikh, more than 6 feet tall. A proud, upturned moustache and dark beard lent him a dark, brooding appearance. He is holding a .303 rifle. His trousers are soaked with blood from the injuries he has been subjected to in the earlier gunfight. He and his men have been able to beat back the first attack from the Pakistanis, but the enemy is back with renewed vigor. Karam Singh does not answer. His eyes are narrowed in concentration. He is watching the armed Pakistani soldiers advancing towards his outpost. There are just 4 men in his section and they have already been under intense shelling. All of them are bleeding from the bullet as well as splintering rock hits from continuous artillery shelling by the enemy. He looks at the gun is in hands, but he knows there are too many for them for gunfire to be effective. Besides, he is running short of ammunition, and since there is continuous shelling, there is no way to get more from the main company position, which is far behind. The enemy soldiers have come closer. Karam Singh reaches into his backpack and pulling out a grenade bites the pin off with his teeth. Swinging his arm in a wide half circle, he flings it at them with the war cry of Jo bole so nihal sat sri akal. The physical strain of the muscle movement runs right down into his leg and he winces in pain, but he does not take his eyes off the arc of the grenade flying through the air. It lands right in the path of the first row of advancing soldiers, and a loud blast echoes through Richmar Gully. Some of the men fall, screaming in pain, the others have lost their composure. It is only then that Karam Singh turns to look at the tense, mud-stained faces of his tired and injured comrades and smiles. ਜਦੋਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਜਾਨ ਦੇ ਦਾਂਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਡੀ ਕੀਮਤ ਵੜ ਜਾਵੇਗੀ. If we die fighting, we will always be remembered, he says, his voice firm. ਸਾਡੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਬੈਠੇ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਲੜਨ ਵਾਲੇ, ਸਾਰੀ ਕੰਪਨੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਹੈ. There are many who will continue the fight after we die. With that, he rummages in his backpack for another grenade, removes the pin and tosses it at those of the enemy soldiers who are still advancing. Another deadly blast rends the air. Lance Nayak Karam Singh was commanding on Alpha Company outpost at Richmar Gully when around 6 am on 13th October 1948, his section came under a do or die attack from the Pakistanis. It was Eid and the Pakistanis had launched a desperate attack to win back the area which has lost to the Indian army. Karam Singh and his men were completely outnumbered, but they refused to be cowed down by the enemy whose aim was to recapture Richmar Gully, skirt Titwal and move in to attack Srinagar. The enemy soldiers were coming in wave after wave in a bid to take over the outposts of A Company of 1 Sikh. It is to their credit that Karam Singh and his men managed to hold on to their post during two fierce attacks, the first of which came at 6 am and the second followed at 9:30 am. The men of 1 Sikh still talk about how these two attacks could be beaten back only because of Karam Singh's courage and will to fight till the end. He is believed to have stemmed the enemy advances almost single-handedly and wiped out two sections with his perfectly aimed grenades. But after repulsing the second attack, the brave soldier was quick to realize that he would not be able to hold on for much longer. He and his men were heavily outnumbered at 1 to 10. 3 of them had already sustained serious injuries and they were also running out of ammunition. In the intense artillery shelling and mortar fire that was coming from the enemy, there was no hope of ammunition being brought to them from the main company position either. They decided to rejoin the main company but insisted on carrying along his two badly wounded comrades. Without a thought for his own safety or injuries, he pulled out the two wounded men with the help of the fourth soldier, who was the only one left unharmed. Putting their lives on hold, the two of them dragged the injured men through the intense enemy shelling and managed to get back to the main company bunkers. Around 10 am, the enemy launched another attack, this time on the company position. Without a thought for his grievous injuries, Karam Singh went about fighting from the front line trenches. He held on even when the enemy mortar fire and shelling managed to destroy almost every single bunker of the platoon. Moving from bunker to bunker, he implored his tired men to continue being brave, to fight like proud Khalsa warriors. He helped in getting the wounded out and encouraged the uninjured to fight back without fear. He did not let the morale of the soldiers sag through the day when the enemy launched one attack after another. During one of these attacks, Karam Singh was injured yet again, but he kept his faith and despite the depleting strength of the company, continued the fight. In the next attack that came around 1 pm, Karam Singh immortalized himself in the war records of his Paltan unit by another exemplary act of bravery. 5th Pakistani attack, 1 pm. The Pakistani soldiers have launched a fifth attack. There has been no respite since 6 am and the tiredness as well as the strain of his injuries bogging Karam Singh down. He grits his teeth to bear the pain and trains his gun on the enemy soldiers moving forward through the grenade smoke. He finds that 2 of them have sprinted the final few yards and are now right in front of his trench, brandishing their rifles. They are too close to be shot without hurting his own men. Without hesitating for a second, Karam Singh fixes the bayonet on to his rifle and leaps out of the trench. Lifting the bayonet in the air with a blood-curdling war cry, he shoves it right inside the chest of the Pakistani soldier in front of him. Before the shocked man can realize what has happened, the hefty Sikh has struck again. Ghop nikal, Karam Singh mumbles under his breath, remembering the drill taught to him by his ustad instructor at the center. The enemy soldier lies dead before him, horror writ large in his open eyes. Pulling the bayonet out of his body, Karam Singh pulls it back as far as his arms can go and in a split second brings it forward again with force, pushing it into the stomach of the next man who's trying to shoot. A fountain of red springs forth as the lethal blade cuts into the man's skin and intestines, making him double up and collapse in pain and terror. Karam Singh pulls his bayonet out and lifting his arm right over his head pushes it into the fallen man once again relieving him of all the pain forever. He jumps back into the trench before his comrades can even fathom what has happened. Shocked by this savage attack and the cold-blooded killings by the hefty Sikh warrior, the enemy soldiers retreat one more time. They do not give up though and keep returning despite being beaten back each time by the strong defense put up by the company. It is 7 p.m. when the enemy's will is finally broken and they give up. By then, they have launched 8 attacks on Karam Singh's company, all of which had been repulsed by the Sikhs. They have fired 300 shells, which have taken a heavy toll and destroyed almost all the A Company bunkers but have not been able to break the spirit of the men. One Sikh lost 10 men and have 37 wounded during the battle, which is later described by Division Commander Major General K.S. Thimmaiya, DSO, as a uniquely magnificent fight. Lance Nayak Karam Singh, MM, is awarded the Paramveer Chakra PVC for his devotion to duty and bravery beyond comparison. He is the first soldier to receive it live. Not only did Karam Singh survive his injuries, he even marched up to India's first president, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, to receive his PVC. This was his second gallantry award. He had been awarded the military medal for his bravery in Burma while he was fighting under the British. He was among the 5 persons chosen by Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru to hoist the national flag on 15th August 1947. He lived on to 77 years of age, rose to the rank of honorary captain in his beloved battalion and died peacefully at home in 1993. Karam Singh is fondly remembered by his regiment as the war hero who not only inspired his men to fight and kill, but also helped them retain their confidence despite being grossly outnumbered in the Battle of Richmar Gully. Most of what I learned from Karam came from Subedar Kala Singh, retired soldier from one Sikh who was Lance Nayak Karam Singh's Sahayak many years back. I took a train, then a 45-kilometer ride out of Bhatinda in an army gypsy to visit him in his brick-lined house in Chalanwali village. The interview was accompanied by Kala Sahib's warm Punjab hospitality, which included endless glasses of sour lassi, rotis served with ghee and pickle, and a photo session with the entire family, which included the family goat and tractor. Old man Kala has a twinkle in his eye when he talks of Karam Singh Saab. He served with the 1948 war hero and has many memories he's keen to share. We all know Saab had got a military medal in Burma when he was a young soldier. Though he did not talk about it at all that much, he would often tell us of episodes from the Battle of Richmar Gully, when he almost single-handedly foiled Pakistani's bid to take over company post. He was a man with guts, says Kala. He could fight not just in war but also in peace. When he felt something was not right, he would never hesitate to say it. When Karam Singh was the quartermaster Havaldar of one Sikh, Kala was appointed his helper. Besides routine jobs, Kala's work involved reading and writing documents on behalf of Karam. Saab had never gone to school. He could barely write his own name. So I would help him make ration cards, condemnation boards, etc., he says. Kala likes to recount an incident that brings out how fearless and forthright Karam Singh was. In the early 60s, Karam Singh was in the Sikh Regimental Centre at Meerut. He was asked to buy sugar for the soldiers from a local mill and was doing that when someone brought into his notice that the sacks of sugar were being soaked in water to increase their weight. A furious Karam told the mill that he would not accept any wet sacks. The mill owner, who was a corrupt but well-connected man, had an argument with Karam. When Karam struck to his stand, the mill owner pushed him physically and threatened him, saying he had connections in Delhi. The hot-headed Karam had reached the end of his patience. He beat up the mill owner. The case was reported, and since the mill owner had connections in high places, Karam was dismissed from service as punishment for manhandling a civilian. Not one to take injustice lying down, Karam went to Delhi with his war medals and sought an interview with the president. It was granted. When he explained to the president what had transpired, he was immediately reinstated in service. The Jawans were thrilled with his victory. Karam had been proved a hero in their eyes once again. एक कहावत है जी, करेला वो भी नीम चढ़ा. A bitter gourd, that too one that grows on neem, chuckles Kala Singh, rubbing a hand over his white beard. एक तो पहले ही कड़वा, ऊपर से नीम के पेड़ पे चढ़ के बैठा हुआ. ऐसा था करम सिंह साहब. एक तो सरदार था, ऊपर से उसके पास अवार्ड था. His fearlessness was compounded by his forthrightness. That was our Karam Singh Sahib. For one, he was a Sardar, and then he had his awards. Karam Singh was born on 15th September 1915 while World War I was being fought. The son of Sardar Uttam Singh, a well-off farmer in Sehna village near Sangrur in Punjab, Karam grew up tending to the fields and playing kabaddi with the boys. He never went to school and could not write much beyond his own name. This did not stop him from rising in the forces. He became the quartermaster Havaldar of his battalion. He was sharp and intelligent, which made up for his lack of writing ability. He was enrolled in the army on 15th September 1941 and was sent to 1 Sec, which was posted in the then Northeast Frontier Agency. He was a good sportsman, excelling at high jump and pole vault, and was recognized in his company as a very brave man right from when he was a young soldier. Much of his reputation came from the military medal that he won for his bravery during the Burma War in 1944. He thus became a hero for his battalion at a very young age. Most of the time while he was in the battalion, he stayed posted in Alpha Company, which was where he got both his gallantry awards. Karam Singh married Gurdail Kaur in the early 1950s. The couple had 2 children, a son and a daughter. The son studied till class 10 and then took to farming while the daughter got married. Karam holds the distinction of being the first living soldier to wear a PVC on his chest. Rama Raghuba Rane, Jammu and Kashmir, April 1948. Rama Raghuba Rane is on his stomach and crawling under a stout tank that is slowly making its way across a minefield. He is trying to do it at a pace that matches the speed of the tank that is moving above him. His leg, badly slashed from exploding mortar, hurts with any movement, but he ignores the pain, concentrating instead on the massive wheels that are turning with a deep rumble that is reverberating in his ears. Rane holds in both his hands thick ropes that are attached to the tank. He is using them as a signal for the tank to stop or move. Each time he spots a mine ahead, he pulls the rope in his right hand and the tank stops. After he has cleared the mine, he pulls the rope in his left hand and the tank starts moving again. The armored vehicles are part of a plan to attack Rajouri and stop the Pakistani raiders who are intent on carnage, rape, and loot. Since every second means a difference between life and death for innocent locals, speed is of the essence and the Indian Army must get there as fast as it can. Rane has devised this method of moving in the minefield under cover of a tank since the area is under constant enemy machine gun fire and his mine clearing section is not able to work otherwise. He spots a telltale circular depression that means there is an anti-tank mine lying underneath. He tugs on the rope in his right hand. Above him the tank grinds to a stop. Using the fingers of both his mud-streaked, calloused hands, Rane scrapes the stones and rubble from around the mine. He then gently removes the cover and reaches in to deactivate the fuse. Putting the lid back on again, he closes his eyes for a fraction of a second and heaves a sigh of relief. He then tugs the rope in his left hand and starts crawling again. 89-year-old Colonel J.P. Chopra, Veer Chakra, sits in his bungalow in Sector 31, Noida, with Pepper and Cookie, his 2 spits scampering around him. Cookie, leave, he says brusquely, and Cookie stops wagging her tail and squeezes herself under the sofa. Pepper slinks out of the door and hides behind the curtain, waiting for a chance to join the conversation again. It has been more than 65 years since the colonel and Rane were together in the same company, but the colonel's memory of the time is vivid. They were from the engineers unit and their job was to clear mines, make roads where there were none, and help the army attack the Pakistani raiders in Kashmir. It was late 1947. War clouds were looming and Pakistan was attacking Kashmir from two directions, from the Srinagar airfield and also from the Jammu side where they were coming onto the Akhnur Naushera axis, he recalls. The Indian army had to pull back from Jhangar and retreat to Naushera. Then they were ordered to go back and attack Jhangar. While 2nd Lieutenant Chopra and a section of 11 people were tasked with clearing the path towards Jhangar, Rane was with two sections, 22 men, trying to make a road for the tanks to attack Rajouri. The men would cross nalas that would swell from 6 inches of water to 10 feet depth if it rained. They would work with little food and rest, often subsisting on dry shakkar paras to get the work done as fast as they could. Persisting even as the tank was blown up when it went over a mine, they lost count of days and dates as they cleared the dead and helped injured soldiers, laying out roads, removing obstacles and clearing mines so that the army could reach Rajouri and stop the carnage the Pakistani raiders were indulging in. To Rane goes the credit of getting the army to Rajouri and thus saving many innocent lives. Advance to Rajouri. It is 6 a.m. On a sunny April day when Rama Raghuba Rane and his section are put on mine clearing duty starting from Nagpur South Fort area near Naushera. The task is to create a safe passage for tanks so that they can move from Naushera to Rajouri where the raiders are attacking the civilian population. After the recapture of Jhangar, the Pakistani army flees but not before completely destroying the national highway from Rajouri to Punj. With no other way to reach Rajouri, the Indian troops are ordered to create their own route till Chingas, which is an old Mughal passage to Kashmir. 2nd Lieutenant Rane and his section of 37 Assault Field Company are attached to Fort Dogra, which starts the advance to Rajouri on 8th April 1948 with an attack on Barwali Ridge, 11 km north of Naushera. They drive out the enemy and capture Barwali Ridge by 4:30 pm but cannot go beyond because not only is the area hilly, there are also massive roadblocks and minefields on the road. This is when Rane and his small team of sappers are pressed into action. They start clearing the roadblocks but it gets dark soon and they are surprised by enemy fire. The Pakistanis have returned and are launching mortar bursts at the men trying to clear the road. In a stroke of bad luck, Rana loses 4 of his men. Sappers Abaji More and Raghunath More are killed. Sappers Sitaram Sutar and Keshu Ambre are badly wounded and later die in hospital, while a splinter hits Lance Nayak M.K. Jadhav in the spine, paralyzing him for life. Rane also gets a deep cut from a splinter that slashes his thigh, but he refuses to be evacuated despite the heavy bleeding from his leg and asks only for first aid. The bulldozer operator does not hear the enemy fire since his own dozer is making so much noise and has to be pulled out and evacuated. Though the Pakistanis are chased off again, plans to clear the roadblock at night are dropped. Rane returns at dawn the next day to start clearing the landslide again. By 10 am, he has managed to clear the roadblock and the tanks move ahead. It soon run into another landslide that is cleared by Rane by 3 pm. The procedure continues with Rane hitching a ride on the tanks. Each time there's a hindrance in the path, he quickly dismounts along with his men and they work on clearing the track. They encounter fallen trees that have been blown up, a culvert that has been damaged so badly that a new path has to be made, and continuous enemy fire that has to be dodged. This continues till dusk when the tanks are halted and the men quickly dig trenches for themselves and take cover for the night. Around 4:45 am the next day Rane is back on the job. Despite great risk to his life, he continues to clear roadblocks and minefields, helping the tanks move ahead. Slowly and steadily they make a path for the advancing troop of tanks and reach Chingas at 2 pm. Rane keeps working till 9 pm to open the road completely. Finally, at 11 a.m. the next day, the road is thrown open to all vehicles, but the men soon discover that the road from Chingas has even worse roadblocks. Since reports of the massacres in Rajouri are reaching the army, a decision is taken for the rest of Rane's unit to work at clearing the road from Chingas, while he and his platoon make a path for the tanks along the bed of the river Tavi all the way to Rajouri. The men get to work again, blowing up the big boulders along the riverside. The river follows an undulating course, and often the tanks have to get in and out of water. Sometimes they get stuck and have to be pulled out. On 11th April, they halt again, and finally on 12th April at 6 p.m., the tanks reach Rajouri. Rane has worked without any rest all these days, and it is a miracle that he has managed to get the men of one Kumaon and the tanks there. Once the men reach Rajouri, they find it is a ghost town. They cross two blood soaked pits of bodies, including those of women and children who have been massacred by the raiders. The arrival of the army ends the violence, and soon refugees start returning to their villages. The engineers are awarded the battle honor of Rajouri and Rane the Paramveer Chakra for his devotion to duty, courage, and gallantry. Major Rama Raghoba Rane's act of exemplary courage would be remembered for a long time by the regiment and also by the women who loved him most. The memory of his courage is one of the first things Mrs. Rajeshwari Rane, his widow, shares with me when I ask her about her husband, one of the rare men who wore a PVC alive. The other indelible memory she has of him is of the time they first saw each other. He was the chief guest at her school, the brave officer being felicitated for the PVC he had received. She was a student of class 12th on stage singing a welcome song. Love at first sight. There was much excitement in Shivaji High School, Sadashivgarh, Karwar Taluka that day. Second Lieutenant Rama Raghoba Rane was being felicitated for winning the highest gallantry award of the country. The program began with a chorus of girls singing a Swagat Geet. Leela was one of the singers and she gave it her best. As an embarrassed Rane looked on, his eyes fell upon a beautiful girl in a sari. She was singing sweetly with all her heart, looking with awe at him. The moment he saw her, he felt she was the one he wanted to spend the rest of his life with and lost no time in expressing this desire to her family. Leela was only 19 then. Rane was a national hero, and though there was an age difference of more than 15 years between the two of them, her family was only too happy to accept him as their son in law. On 3rd February 1955, the two got married. 78 years old now, Mrs. Rane sits in her Pune house and smiles gently at the memory of her 19-year-old self and the bold and brave army officer who fell in love with her. He extended his leave and left only after we had got married. Before that, he asked me if he could change my name to Rajeshwari. He told me that during the PVC felicitations that were happening for him around the country, he had once been invited to a Maharaja's palace, and there he had seen the Maharani whose name was Rajeshwari. She was really beautiful and had impressed him thoroughly. When he came back home, he had prayed to God that he should also get a girl who was as beautiful as she was. When he saw me for the first time, I reminded him of her and he felt I was the one for him. क्या आपको राजेश्वरी नाम पसंद है? Do you like the name Rajeshwari? He had asked and I had said yes. हम साधारण लोग थे. उन्होंने मुझे महारानी का दर्जा दे दिया. We were ordinary folk. He elevated me to a queen, she says shyly. She recounts many stories of his brave and fearless temperament, some of which she heard from him or his colleagues, others that happened in front of her eyes in the years that they lived together. She tells me how when he was serving in Kashmir, a girl once fell into a well. He jumped in without a thought for his own safety and brought her out. Another time, when they had been married just a few years, he had taken her for a movie at Bhanu Vilas Hall in Pune. A fight had broken out in the crowd waiting outside the hall, and it had taken a very violent turn. When things started getting uncontrollable, Rane leaped into the fighting mob and brought it under control by shouting at the crowd. Again, he did not think about his own safety even as his extremely worried young wife watched on quietly. Then in 1962, while Rane was posted in Calcutta, Hindu Muslim riots broke out. Detailed to contain the riots, Rane would walk often right inside deeply communal mohallas, while Rajeshwari would spend her time next to the phone, sick with fear, waiting for calls that could tell her if her husband was safe. Rama Rakhoba Rane came from a martial race, the Ranes, who had migrated to South India. He belonged to the Konkan Kshatriya Maratha community of Karwar. Bravery seemed to have been in his genes. He served in the army for 21 years and had the distinction of getting 5 mentioned in dispatches for his bravery and enterprise. Not only did he earn a name for himself during the trouble with Pakistan in 1947 to 48, he was also known for his acts of bravery during his tenure in Burma during World War II. He is said to have shot down an enemy plane with his medium machine gun. Rane was born in Chendia village in Karnataka on 26 June 1918. His father was a head constable of police. He studied in the district schools, moving frequently with his father because of his transfers. He was interested in sports, outdoor activities, and adventure right from when he was a small boy. When World War II broke out, 22-year-old Rane decided to join the army and was recruited into the Bombay Sappers in July 1940. During the passing out parade, he stood very high in the order of merit and was presented with the commandant's cane for best recruit. He remained in 37 Field Company till August 1950, after which he was posted to the Bombay Engineer Group Centre. He got his PVC in 1951. In July 1954, he was awarded the Chief of Army Staff's commendation card for devotion to duty for his work during the Mahaprabhu Mela in Kashmir. Rane went on to command a bomb disposal platoon and retired as a major on 25th June 1968. But his love for the army did not let him leave and he sought re-employment. He continued to wear the uniform till April 1971. After retirement, he settled down in Pune. He passed away at 73 in 1994 after undergoing an operation where the doctors were not able to stop his bleeding. He is survived by his wife, Mrs. Rajeshwari Rane, who continues to live in Pune. Jadunath Singh, Taindhar, Kashmir, 6 February 1948. Dawn has not broken, but all signs indicate it is going to be a cold and grey February morning. There is frost on the grass, masking the green with translucent white fluff. A swirling mist swept in through the night, and a dense fog still hangs over the slopes of Teendhar Ridge, where the 10 men of 9 platoon, C Company of 1 Rajput battalion, sit guarding picket number 2. They have just finished making tea in silence and are now over steaming enamel mugs of the milk powder sweetened brew, exchanging their concerns with each other in hoarse whispers, their voices still gruff from another endless stressful night. The orders for them had been to defend the picket which lies on the left shoulder of the Tindhar range against an enemy attack, and they have been holding fort sincerely, though it has been peaceful so far. Intelligence reports have repeatedly hinted that Pakistani raiders out to take over Kashmir would be heading for Naushera and Teendhar Falls on the way, which is why the men have been placed there. Every day and night the soldiers waited for an attack, but there have been none, even though excessive enemy build-up had been reported in the areas around. Shivering in their trenches in the brutal cold of Kashmir that morning, the 10 men do not know that today is going to be the day. Thousands of Pakistani raiders have crept upon their tiny post in the darkness of the night and are just waiting for daybreak to attack. It is getting late and the shadows are falling when our car cruises into B's military station, where 4 guards, earlier called 1 Rajput, are stationed. Winding between tractors, cars, and motorcycles driven by brightly turbaned sardars who didn't give a damn about traffic rules has been painful, and frankly, I'm not expecting much even at the end of the journey. It has been more than 50 years since Nayak Jadunath Singh or Yadunath Singh, the records call him both names, died, and so far the leads have come to nothing. All the soldiers who fought the terrible battle of Teen Thar with Yadunath Singh are dead too. He never married, so there's no real family to speak to. I'm seriously worried about how I'll write this Paramveer Chakra account. In sheer desperation, I visit Bias where four guards are located. The only information I have comes from the memoirs of the late Lieutenant Colonel Kishan Singh Rathod, who was a young captain during the Battle of Teen Thar. He has written, since the enemy was so close, there was no question of covering fire and there was only hip firing and lobbing of grenades. The attack was frontal. We were grateful that they did not attack from the sides. Had the enemy attacked us at night, they would have won within 5 minutes and we would have all been slaughtered. It was then that the most astonishing thing happened. The enemy blew the retreat bugle, and at almost the same time, Major Gurdayal Singh of Three Rajput arrived. The enemy lost over 1,000 men. Victory was so complete that from then on, Naushera front, the enemy was keener on running than fighting. I learned that it took 7 days for the battalion to clear the bodies that outnumbered in thousands. The enemy did not claim its dead. After nearly 3 days, the stench was such that the defences could not be occupied. A little more of what I know comes from retired Brigadier N. Bahari of 4 Grenadiers who now lives in Noida. Brigadier Bahari tells me that when he joined the battalion in 1960 and was appointed the adjutant, Nayak Yadunath had already been dead for 12 years. But Subedar Major Ami Singh, who was the 9 platoon commander during the Battle of Teen Thar, would often tell him about Yadunath. Ami Singh would talk vividly of the operation and would start crying each time he spoke of Yadunath Singh, Brigadier Bahari remembers. But I still did not have Yadunath's complete story, and as a last ditch effort, I take on the 9-hour drive from Delhi to Bias that will bring me to the battalion's present location. There, I have been told that they have an archive where old war diaries lie preserved. They are my last hope. Shortly after crossing the Bias River that murmurs conversationally along the mustard fields that glow a faint yellow in the moonlight, I see a big gate looming. Paramveer Paltan, 4 guards, it proclaims proudly. Inside we cross Brune's bungalow, the commandant's residence named after Major George Sackville Brown, the first commandant. I'm told that since the Indians pronounced this name Brune in those days, the nomenclature has stuck and the battalion has continued to call itself Brune Ka Paltan. A smiling mess Havaldar R.D. Tiwari waits beside a painted signboard that says Yadunath Parade Ground. He guides us to the mess where a shining bust of Yadunath is placed. Lieutenant Aditya Tanwar, a tall, lanky, fourth-generation officer, springs forth to open and close doors for me and then escorts me to the battalion archives where framed pictures of Yadunath and the other braves of the Battle of Teen Dhar look down from a wall. In the next room are neat stacks of wet war diaries with fading yellow parchment paper that have been treated at the Indian Military Academy. They are bound carefully and covered with plastic. Aditya bends over and proudly points out the exact noting done in pen on paper on 16th February 1948, recounting the battle where Nayak Yadunath Singh got his Paramveer Chakra. He points to the 23 glass jars that are neatly lined in a corner. Filled with stones and mud, they are labeled with the names of all 23 places where the battalion was fought various battles and received battle honours. As I lean over to read while Havaldar Pramesh, archives in charge for 14 years, and Lieutenant Tanwar discuss Yadunath's last battle in respectful whispers, I am struck by a fascinating thought. Soldiers don't die when bullets pierce their hearts and heads through their olive green shirts and woolen balaclavas. They don't die when they fall before an enemy onslaught or even when they get buried in trenches, staining the earth with their warm crimson blood. It is only when we forget their acts of bravery that soldiers die. And though we have killed many that way, The officers and men of four guards, Paramveer Paltan, have made Yadunath immortal by remembering him every single day of their lives. He lives in their battalion parade ground, in their mess, their archives, their thoughts, and their conversations. He might not be around anymore, but strangely enough, Nayak Yadunath of the dark eyes and upturned moustache continues to stride across their mess, and their unit lines up, pulsating with life as you or I are, or as he himself was on 6th February 1948, when he commanded a section of 9 men and defended Tindhar when thousands of raiders launched an offensive to capture Naushera and the Jammu province. The trouble. When India became independent, Jammu and Kashmir was one princely state that refused to accede to either India or Pakistan. However, Pakistan hatched a plot to attack and take over the province and built up a huge force of raiders. The raiders began to attack the border towns and created a terrible atmosphere of murder, mayhem, loot, and rape. The Maharaja of J&K approached the Indian government for help, but the Indian government told him the army could not fight outside their own country's borders. The Maharaja was asked to sign the document of accession to India, and as soon as he had done so, the Indian army was sent to defend its borders. One Rajput was one of the chosen battalions. It had a brief stay of 2 months at Gurdaspur to integrate the two new companies and prepare to move operations to J&K. The unit moved to Naushera by road and reached there by 8th December 1947. It came under the 50 Para Brigade, and soon the companies were spread out over posts that included .2533, area code Teendhar, .3319 and .3754. They were given the task of defending the Jammu, Akhnur, Naushera, Rajouri, Poonch road axis. The men went in for heavy patrolling of the area, but there were strong reports of the enemy forces building up for an attack. On the night of 5 to 6 February, the listening posts warned of the enemy accumulating north of Naushera. An attack could be expected, most probably at Teendhar, where Nayak Yadunath manned a picket with very limited men and ammunition at his disposal. 6th February 1948. It was dawn and a weak orange sun was slowly lighting up the horizon. Looking into the distance, Yadunath noticed moving specks that appeared to be coming closer. The fog was hampering his vision, and he wasn't sure if it was just an illusion of the mind, so he nudged the soldier standing next to him, and they both watched in quiet concentration. Yadunath had not been mistaken. The Pakistani raiders were here, and even as his eyes adjusted to the translucent haze, he noticed that they were slowly coming closer. The time for battle had come. As Yadunath's eyes darted from one speck to another, he realized that there were hundreds of them, fully armed and striding across the vegetation. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He had only 9 soldiers with him. The enemy had surrounded them in numbers he couldn't even count. He and his men had only choices: to surrender or fight till the last man. He knew what he was going to do. Even as Yadunath and his men watched from their trenches, the specks in the distance turned into the breaded, sunburnt faces of Pakistani raiders and Pathans. Guns in hand, they were now emerging one after the other from the thickets and behind rocks and boulders. The moment they were within firing distance, they started shooting, and soon the surrounding hills rang with the sound of machine gun and mortar fire. The raiders had a mad ferocity about them. They had been promised wealth and women. Some of their comrades had already returned home with the booty, and the women they had abducted after raiding border villages, and the others were looking forward to the same experience. They had not expected the Indian army to come to Kashmir's aid, but they were prepared for battle, and they knew the Indian soldiers were heavily outnumbered. Yadunath shouted to his men to take position, and together the 10 brave directed their light machine guns at the first wave of attackers. Cries of Allahu Akbar rang out as the two warring sections met. As soon as an enemy soldier fell dead, 2 more would take his place. The men came like a swarm of locusts in hundreds. One after another, they made their way to the picket in droves, shooting continuously. Yadunath and his men started flinging hand grenades at them, but despite that, some of the raiders managed to enter the trenches. Bloody hand to hand combat followed with clashing bayonets glistening in the morning sun. The first wave of raiders was eventually beaten back, but at a heavy cost. Of Yadunath's force of 10, 4 men had been wounded. They had barely recovered when the second wave of the assault came, stronger and even more brutal. The raiders managed to get so close that Havaldar Dayaram, the Motar NCO non-commissioned officer, took a big chance. Putting his own life at stake, he removed the secondary charges from the tubes to fire within 35 to 50 yards of the unit defenses. The mortar fire became more accurate, but it was so close that there was danger of Dayaram killing his own men. It is to his credit that the risk was overcome and great devastation caused amongst the attacking raiders. The brave men were unfortunately completely outnumbered, and almost all the soldiers of Yadunath's sections had been injured. The cries of the injured men rent the air, but even then, those who could stand continued to hold their guns despite their injuries and fought. Yadunath himself had received bullet injuries on his right arm and thigh. Though badly hurt, he dragged himself to his wounded Bren gunner and took over the gun. By this time, the enemy had reached the walls of the post, but Yadunath and his men did not give up. One of the non-combatants, who was not even trained to fight, also picked up an enemy rifle and shot dead a few attackers. Records say that when his ammunition finished, he picked up an enemy sword and charged bravely at the raiders till he was finally shot dead. There were many such stories of bravery, but Yadunath towered all over the others. Battered and bleeding, yet completely unmindful of his own safety, he encouraged his men to fight and battled valiantly by their side. He fought so bravely and with such unflinching courage and determination that what looked like certain defeat was turned into victory. The post was saved a second time. By now, however, all the men of the post had become casualties. Realizing this, the enemy was quick to attack again. In the third attack, Nayak Yadunath Singh, now wounded and alone, rose to fight single-handedly. Like a warrior blessed with eternal life, he came out of the trenches, bloody and limping, gun in hand. Firing at the enemy, his injured arm dripping blood, he charged. Shocked by his mad disregard for personal safety, the surprised enemy fled in disorder. Yadunath was still walking when a bullet came whizzing and lodged in his chest. He ignored it and continued to fire till another one whipped into his head. Eyes still open and breathing fire, Yadunath dropped to his knees and crumbled in front of number 2 picket of Teendhar. His bullet-riddled body lay there with his eyes still staring at the retreating enemy soldiers, and there Nayak Yadunath Singh breathed his last. He had not allowed the enemy to take over his picket. It was discovered later that Yadunath suffered 8 bullet wounds during the 3 waves of the attack. There were many other heroes besides him who died fighting that day. They were men who had lived up to the highest traditions of bravery and glory. Yadunath Singh stood tall for his own sacrifice. For his gallant action in the face of the enemy, he was honored posthumously with the Param Veer Chakra. His story has been immortalized in the battalion war records. The war record of 6th February 1948 that I came across in the Four Guards archives, written in ink on parched paper that feels brittle to the touch, reads, Number 2, 9, 7 and Kipper's Post attacked simultaneously. Enemy put in about 1500 to 2000 on each picket. Enemy launched the attack in several ways. The battle lasted for 2 hours. Last wave beaten back by cold steel and bayonet. Enemy retired, leaving 260 bodies, 131 rifles and over 200 swords. Total enemy casualties believed 3000 killed, 1000 wounded. Own casualties 21 killed and 62 wounded. Nayak Yadunath Singh was born on 21st November 1916 in Khajuri village of Sahajanpur in Uttar Pradesh to a poor farmer called Birbal Singh Rathod. The young Yadunath was attached to his mother Jamuna Kanwar. He was one of the 8 siblings, 7 boys and a girl. The family was not very well off. There were many mouths to feed, and Yadunath had no access to a good education. Till he was in class 4, he attended the village school, working in the fields or at home after school to contribute to the family. He was noticed in the village because he became a wrestling champion and would often sort out goons who misbehaved. He was also deeply religious and a staunch devotee of Hanuman, so much to that he took a vow to remain a bachelor for life and followed it. When Yadunath was 25 years old, he enrolled in the Rajput regiment on 21st November 1941 at the regimental centre, Fatehgarh. After he had completed his training, he was sent to the 1st Battalion of the Rajput Regiment. He took part in World War II, showing glimpses of leadership and gallantry even then. He was promoted to the rank of Nayak and appointed commander of a section of troops. His true colors showed in the Battle of Teen Dhar, where he bravely battled a fierce enemy despite his men being completely outnumbered. Yadunath's performance continues to be a great inspiration to the men of his battalion even now. Every year, Naushera Day is celebrated in Four Guards with great solemnity, and a presentation is made on the Battle of Teen Dhar by the officer commanding C Company to acknowledge and remember the great act of bravery performed by Nayak Yadunath Singh in 1948. The hero lives on. Piru Singh Shekhawat, The Battle of Darapari, 18th July 1948. It is a dark purple moonlit night, but Company Havaldar Major, CHM, Piru Singh cannot afford to look up. The route is steep and filled with loose stones. One misstep can send him plunging down into the valley, leaving a mass of broken flesh and bones. Piru Singh's boot has just struck a rock that has gone tumbling down. For a fraction of a second, he stops to look at its deep descent, and then he looks up at the treacherous ridge he and his section from Delta Company, 6 Rajputana rifles, are trudging up. If he arcs his neck right up at an angle of nearly 180 degrees, he can see where the mountain ends. Dark, craggy, uninviting. That is where the enemy sits, and that is where he and his men are headed. D Company has been tasked with attacking and dislodging Pakistani irregulars from Darapari in the Titwal sector of Kashmir. It is at a height of 11,481 feet, and the attacking company has been told that the enemy is sitting there watching the narrow path that winds its way up, though they have probably not had enough time to dig in deep. Piru Singh takes a few deep breaths and resumes his climb. The air is starting to get colder, and the long march of 30 miles all the way from Tangdhar has started telling on the spirit of the soldiers. He knows they are tired. So is he. But in war, tiredness is the least of a soldier's concern. To distract himself from the long climb ahead, Piru Singh lets his thoughts drift to 9 months back. His battalion had been in Gurgaon, involved in internal security duties when orders came for them to move to Kashmir. The hill state needed to be defended from raiding Pathans and Pakistani army regulars. The soldiers were airlifted to Srinagar on 5th November 1947. For many of them, it was the first ride in an airplane, and for a few moments, at least, the threat of war was overshadowed by the thrill of that first plane ride. Once in Kashmir, the battalion was thrown off in the midst of action, and the brave men more than proved themselves in the first few months. In April 1948, they were sent to Uri and had fought a vicious enemy attack where they inflicted major damages on the enemy. They went on to capture an enemy position on the night of 29th April, for which rifleman Dhonkal Singh was awarded a Mahavir Chakra posthumously. He had immediately become a battalion hero. Dhonkal had guided his platoon through a thick pine forest along a ridge and had faced the brunt of enemy light machine gun fire. In spite of suffering a serious injury on his left shoulder, Dhonkal Singh had crawled ahead and destroyed the enemy post by flinging a hand grenade at it. Hit by splinters in the face and chest, he had known he would not live long and had used all his remaining strength to lob another grenade at the retreating enemy soldiers, killing them instantaneously. The post had been captured by 6 Rajputana rifles, but Thonkal Singh has succumbed to his injuries. Piru Singh, full of respect for his brave comrade, does not know that he will be soon perform an act of bravery that will be as incredible as Thonkal's. Humming a tune to himself, he marches on. The entire spring of 1948 had been used by the Indian Army to launch a major attack to throw the intruders right out of Kashmir. Orders came for 6 Rajputana rifles, which was at Uri, to march to Tithwal to strengthen the 163 Infantry Brigade across the Nastachund Pass. The brigade was planning an offensive to dislodge the Pakistanis sitting in this sector. The pass was at 10,264 feet, and the companies were deployed in areas flanked by Point 11481 on Kafir Khan Ridge, that was a feature occupied by the Pakistanis. The battalion had to move at 24 hours' notice and was to take up position on the Baniwala Dana Ridge on 12 July. But a deep nala separated the ridge from where the Indian Army was positioned, and the engineers had to be called to build a bridge across this so that the soldiers could cross over. Time was at a premium, and the deadline given for the bridge to be in place was the evening of 11th July. Though all efforts were made, it was tough task and the engineers could not meet the deadline. Since the attack could not be delayed further, the engineers put a big log of wood across the nala. This was the makeshift bridge that B and D companies of 6 Rajputana rifles, along with the modified battalion headquarters, used to cross over on the night of 11th July. B Company led the advance, and at 5:30 a.m. on 12 July, they managed to capture one of the features without facing any opposition from the enemy. D Company was told to pass through and secure the second feature. The attacks by 6 Rajputana rifles and 3 Royal Garhwal rifles continued. The enemy was chased away, arms and ammunition captured, and a counter attack repulsed. Reconnaissance parties and patrols were then sent out to ascertain the enemy positions, and the soldiers came back and reported that a feature called Darapari, which was at 11,481 feet, dominated the 163 Brigade defended sector. It was heavily defended by Pakistani Army irregulars. Just a bit further was yet another feature held by the enemy. It was felt that if the Indian Army wanted to make any further progress, Darapari and the second feature would have to be captured. The task of capturing Darapari was given to 6 Rajputana rifles under the command of Lieutenant Colonel S.S. Kallan on 16th July 1948. On 18th July, the battalion attacked along the narrow and razor-sharp ridge. This was going to be the operation where CHM Piru Singh would fight until death and secure for his battalion the covered Darapari and also bring home the Param Veer Chakra. 18th July 1948, 1:30 a.m. The path that leads from D Company's forward position to Darapari is barely 1 meter wide. On both sides are deep gorges, and the soldiers are moving ahead silently in the dark, loaded rifles in their hands. D Company has been tasked with clearing Darapari, and after that had been secured, C Company is to move in, pass through, attack and capture the second feature. Night time has been chosen for the offensive deliberately so as not to alert the enemy soldiers and to take them unawares. Nobody will talk, light a match or even cough. Piru Singh, whose platoon is leading the attack, tells his men and they nod in agreement. Up above somewhere are Pakistanis, and Piru Singh is sure that they have the path in their gun sights. Alerting them to the presence of the Indian Army soldiers climbing up would be suicidal. Though intelligence reports say that the enemy could not have had time to make proper trenches and hence it would be easy to throw them out, these reports turn out to be wrong. Unknown to the soldiers, the enemy has dug 5 bunkers that overlook this narrow path and had it covered completely by 3 medium machine guns, MMGs. The Pakistanis are also anticipating an attack and are alert. So the moment the advancing soldiers reach close to their bunkers, they open fire. D Company is trapped in their bottleneck and caught completely unaware. Bullets and shells fly in the cold night, which reverberates with the screams of hit soldiers. Within a short span of 30 minutes, as many as 51 soldiers become casualty to the machine guns, grenade attacks, and 2-inch and 3-inch mortars. Suddenly, there's complete chaos. If at that crucial moment Piru Singh does not step in and decide to put his own life at risk to further the advance of his company, the battle would be lost right then. Piru Singh is with the forward section. Half of his men have fallen already, and he can see them bleeding, limbs ripped apart, their moans filling the gaps in the din of the crossfire. Some of them are dead, others disabled by their injuries. Piru Singh himself has miraculously escaped though his clothes are signed and ripped by the grenade attacks, and his arms and legs are bleeding from shrapnel injuries. He knows that the only way to tackle this attack is to silence the machine guns that are breathing fire on the mountain. Completely unmindful of his own safety, he makes a dash for the nearest bunker from which the machine gun fire is coming. Rushing through the hail of bullets, he sprays the enemy soldiers lodged in the trench with 10 gunfire. Before they realize he's there, he jumps in and bayonets the men handling the gun. They fall with loud screams of pain and shock, and the gun falls silent. By then, the damage is done, and Piru Singh realizes that all his comrades are dead. He's the only one left alive in his section. Screaming in anger, he leaps across the boulders to the next MMG post. The enemy have noticed his lone act and direct fire at him. A grenade flung at him finds its mark. It wounds him in the face and eyes, but Piru Singh is beyond pain and discomfort. He doesn't notice the blood dripping down his chin and seeping into his shirt collar. Climbing out of the trench, he wipes the blood out of his eyes and starts lobbing grenades at the next enemy position. Walking through the attacking fire, he makes his way to the second bunker and climbing in, bayonets the 2 soldiers manning the second MMG. 2 of the guns have now fallen silent, but he knows there is one more. By now, he is starting to lose consciousness because of the excessive blood loss. His eyes are shutting and the blood is dripping right into them. By sheer dint of willpower, Piru Singh forces his eyes to stay open. He pulls himself out of the second trench with great difficulty, and shouting out the battalion war cry, Raja Ram Chand ki Jai, he pulls out a grenade. He has not reached the third bunker when a bullet hits him in the head. Piru Singh knows he is falling. He wants to reach the next machine gun, but he no longer has any power over his limbs. Grenade in hand, he tries to walk, but his legs collapse under him. Even as he drops to the ground, he manages to remove the pin from the last grenade and lobs it at the third bunker. The grenade traces an arc, and as Piru Singh lies breathing his last on the ridge of Darapari, he wills his eyes open to stay open. He watches the grenade find its mark. A loud blast rings out, and he watches the bunker collapse, killing the enemy soldiers and silencing the MMG inside. Piru Singh Shekhawat finally closes his eyes. C Company commander witnesses this act of heroism while directing fire in support of the attacking company. For his unmatched bravery, inspiring example, and superhuman courage in the face of the enemy, CHM Piru Singh is awarded the Paramveer Chakra posthumously. The 6th Battalion Rajputana Rifles is awarded the Battle Honour of Darapari. In a letter to Piru Singh's mother, the then Prime Minister of India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, writes, he paid with his life for his singularly brave act, but he left for the rest of his comrades a unique example of single-handed bravery and determined cold courage. The country is grateful for this sacrifice made in the service of the motherland, and it is our prayer that this may give you some peace and solace. Piru Singh Shekhawat was born on 20th May 1918 in Rampura Beri village of Churu, Rajasthan, then Rajputana. He came from a large agricultural family and was one of 7 siblings. He was the youngest of 3 brothers and had 4 sisters. Piru began school at the age of 6, but right from the beginning he did not like any kind of restriction. School became a daily punishment for this free-spirited, happy-go-lucky child, and finally one day he decided he had had enough. Flinging his slate at his teacher, Piru ran away from his classroom. He never returned, preferring to tend to the fields with his father rather than sit inside a boring, restrictive classroom. Piru was fond of hunting and roaming the forests and now had all the time for the things he loved. The army had always appealed to him as a career and he kept going to recruitment camps till he was selected. At 18, he joined the army, coincidentally on his birthday, 20th May 1936. He was sent to 10-1 Punjab. After training for a year at Jhelum, he was posted to 5-1 Punjab. Though he had hated school once in the army, where he always wanted to be, Piru quickly cleared his promotional exams one after the other and soon became a Lance Nayak and then, within a year, a Nayak. He was posted as an instructor in the Punjab Regimental Centre at Jhelum. In May 1945, he was appointed Company Havaldar Major. He even went to Japan after World War II ended to serve with the Commonwealth Occupational Forces. By the time he returned in September 1947, India and Pakistan had become two countries. Being a part of the Rajput segment of 5-1 Punjab, Piru was sent to 6 Rajputana Rifles. These were the terrible days when the Pakistani army, in connivance with Pathan raiders, were attacking Jammu and Kashmir. Piru's battalion was flown to Kashmir and was part of the force used to push the raiders back beyond Uri. This was the background in which Piru Singh showed exemplary bravery and posthumously won his Param Veer Chakra. He died on 18th July 1948. He was 30 years old.